אז שלום לכולם, זו זכות גדולה, השנה אנחנו ממריאים, going up. הרבנית דבינה, נכון? את צריכה להסביר לי איפה השם הזה, כן? שאני לא יודעת, דבינה, זו זכות גדולה. כך אני אמרתי כבר בשיעור מבוא, שאצלנו זה הפתח לכל העולם, ככה טניה התחילה, טניה הגיעה, remember טניה ווייט הגיעה אלינו ועוד כמה כאלו, הגיעו אלינו שקטות צעירות, יעל לייבוביץ', יש כמה, כן, אני לא אמנה את כולן, שהגיעו ככה ולא ידעו ולא מכירים את דבינה, אז עכשיו כולם יכירו אותה, זה הפתח, זה הקרקע לכל, אבל אני אומרת את זה
כולם עוזבים אותנו אחרי כמה שנים.
אז אנחנו צריכים לעשות גם זה, כן, 10 שנים, זה בסדר, טניה תחזור גם כן וכולם, אבל בסדר, אנחנו זה, אבל רק אני עשיתי קודם כל וולקאם לדבינה, שפה זה הדרך הכי טובה לגדול.
Excuse me, is this course in English or in Hebrew? English or English?
In English.
Okay, thank you. Okay.
Change my language. Okay, it's in English, definitely.
Okay, thank you.
So welcome everybody, welcome in the Zoom, okay, in the Zoom link, please, okay? Okay, as we are starting, בבקשה.
So, okay, wow. I was just holding on to the fact that I was considered Seira. I was just enjoying it. Tomorrow's my 49th birthday, so that's good. How you guys good? My kids don't think I'm Seira, so anyway, they never do. The gap just seems to get bigger and bigger. Okay, so hi everyone. It's really nice to be back. I think I introduced myself last time I came, but maybe I didn't. Maybe for the sake of people who weren't here, my name is Davina. I live in Yerushalayim, married to Nir. We have 4 kids and a dog, and I have been teaching for many years. My kind of major work has been in the Pelech High School. As a mechanechet and as a teacher of history and Jewish philosophy. I also teach at Midrashat Linzenbaum. I taught at Pardes for a number of years, and I'm trying to write a doctorate in Jewish philosophy. That's kind of
So that's the place to start.
yeah. Tanya was a chanicha of mine many years ago in England, and we've had like whatever. I don't know if nachat is the right word. Like, I don't know if that's what I said, but when I see her work and her meteoric rise, I think nachat. I think, you know, that makes me old, right? If I say that looking, but yeah, only by a couple. Yeah, she's on it. And whatever. When I was in touch with Tamar about what I should be teaching, she actually, of the range of things I suggested to her, this is what she suggested would work best. So I hope that we've made a good decision and this is the right place to be. What I want to do today is I'm going to hand out now, and I've sent it to the drive. So I hope that people online, hi everyone online, I hope that you guys have access to the sheets I'm about to give out. The first sheet is actually, I should keep one for myself, is kind of like my wish list, I would say, my bucket list of what I hope that we're actually going to achieve this year. And I say that carefully because I don't know if we're going to get through everything. I also don't know, this is part of why I'm handing this out now. That's because I want you to get a sense of where we're going. Hopefully it will something here should pique someone's interest. That's what I'm hoping. But also maybe if I have a very strong sense of, oh no, we don't want to do this, then I will go with you. Especially after last time I came here, one of the things we did was we were looking at comparing the Rambam with Rabbi Tzadok, and then I discovered that you spent a whole year studying Rabbi Tzadok, and I felt terrible about that I'd forced you guys to do him again.
Something new. Always true. And we don't remember, so it's okay.
Yeah. Okay. So, okay. So let's start with this sheet, okay, before I hand out for today. And there's a few things I want to say about this list, okay. The idea of this course is to introduce you to a broad range of Jewish thinkers, okay, throughout time. It's obviously not extensive. Okay, what do I mean by that? There are so many people that could appear on a list like this, right? It could be, right, so at some point we have to kind of narrow in and focus on what's going to happen here. And how do I narrow in, right? I narrow in, first of all, because there are things that I feel that I have more speciality in, or I'm more confident in, or things that has come from what I've been taught. In some ways, relooking at this list is kind of getting to know me, okay? Because it's about the people also that I'm interested in or more interested in. When I say it's not extensive, I also mean, obviously, we're not going to cover whole books in what we're doing here this year, right? What we're trying to do is to try and meet a certain thinker in the time that he lives. I'm always going to give you, hopefully, an historical context, try and place him in kind of the milieu that he worked in, the community that he came from, what the issues that he was dealing with, whatever it was. And we're going to try and take a taster of something that he or she wrote, okay? A taster, right? So maybe I'll choose a few topics and we'll focus on those topics, and that's how we're going to have a look at them. Obviously, there are people. Okay, that sounded painful. Obviously, there are people that we're going to probably spend more time on. Okay, for example, I'm just picking out someone here. The Rambam, he's going to get a lot of airtime. Okay, and it's because of his stature and his erudition and just the kind of the sheer volume of the stuff that he produced and his impact on the Jewish world. So he's probably we're going to spend more time on him than what we're going to do today, the person we're going to meet today, who is Rabbi Sadia Gaon. That's just an example. Another thing that you might see from this list is that there is a strong modern influence here. That's to do with my areas of interest. Obviously, there were more people in both the medieval period that we could have looked at and that I haven't placed on the list. And my insistence that we have to have some women on this list. Maybe there were more women writing Jewish philosophy and we don't know them. I say that in the spirit of Virginia Woolf's The Room of One's Own, or someone who defines themselves as Ploni, Almoni, and it turns out that they were actually women, or whatever it is, or changed their name like George Eliot or whatever it was. Maybe there were more women writing Jewish philosophy, but unfortunately, we don't know. We don't have so many of them. This is what we're going to try and do. Maybe we'll be able to add ourselves one day to the list. But so what I've put in though at the end, I think Tamar Ross might be a name that is familiar to many people. She is a teacher of mine, and I would like, it would be wonderful for me to think about her in that way and place her in our list. And the last woman, I assume most people in this room, unless they're French speakers, have not heard about Catherine Chelier. She's just one of the people that I'm studying in my doctorate. And I think it would also be amazing to place her in this list. But again, whatever, this is just, it's kind of
connection between all of them.
All of the people in the list, they're all what we would call Jewish philosophers. They've all contributed to the world of Jewish philosophy over time. Okay. I mean, that's a very broad statement. I could say something else here.
Jewish philosophy within the Torah context or outside?
Okay, so it's funny. It's one of the things I put a question mark for myself today, whether I even needed to talk about it with you guys. So maybe that's a topic that what is Jewish philosophy? What do I mean when I say Jewish philosophy, right? So I'm going to talk about that a little bit with you now. But another thing I want to say, and I'll say it kind of carefully, for a couple of reasons. When you ask, what do all these thinkers share in common? In modern parlance, you could say most of them are Orthodox, okay? And this was another way of, how do I take a huge broad list and narrow it down and bring it to you, something within what is the realm of possibility for this year? Most of them, I don't want to get into measuring the length of people's tzitzit and deciding who and what. I don't think that Baruch Spinoza would fit into that criterion. I feel like for intellectual honesty, I have to put that out there. But he is a really important Jewish thinker that we need to grapple with. And it is possible to say that all modern Jewish thought was grappling with Baruch Benedict Spinoza. So if we need to know something about him in order to be able to understand other people and to engage with the ideas that he raised. It's just as I said this carefully, I'm just thinking now about all the people who might not fit into that description. Martin Buber was an intensely religious and intensely spiritual thinker, but he was not a religious thinker. Okay, but again, many, all the names that follow Martin Buber have been influenced by Buber, and so once again, we can't ignore him. Okay, we can't take him out of the pantheon. You should know that in Israel, the curriculum for teaching Machshevet Yisrael for the Bagut, I once, as a teacher of Machshevet Yisrael for Bagut in Israel, I've often had to attend Hishtalmuyot, and one of the first Hishtalmuyot that we had as teachers, the head of Machshevet Yisrael, the Mafmar, he laid out kind of his criterion of who made it into the book that maybe some of your children might study or have studied for Bagut. How do they decide who was in there? And it was actually a question I asked because there are no women in the book. And it led to a whole discussion with all the teachers in the room about whether there should be women, whether we should scrape the barrel and put women in just to say that there are women, or whether the women need to be really good in order to make it. So it's a very interesting discussion. It happens in many areas, I think. But he laid out his criterion that all the thinkers had to be religious or orthodox. And then it's very interesting because people there's a section in the book about Viktor Frankl, and somehow a lot of people managed to get in on the back of someone else. We were like, wait a second, they're all religious, but what about him and what about him? Anyway, somehow he managed to smooth everything out. But I want to go back to the question of what is Jewish philosophy, okay? Because it's interesting. If we were to attend university and do a course in Jewish philosophy, it's probably every first class is devoted to this question, right? What is Jewish philosophy? And it's interesting that we even need to justify it, right? People have degrees. I have a master's in it, right? And I'm doing a doctorate in Jewish philosophy, but somehow we still need to define what it is.
But we never, as growing up in a background, never took one course on Jewish philosophy.
Although I'm sure, did you go to a Jewish day school? So for sure. You studied Rambam.
That's about it.
Sefer HaKuzari.
More from a halachic point of view.
Interesting.
Sefer Kuzari.
He didn't learn Kuzari.
He didn't learn Kuzari? Okay, it's really interesting.
But that's elementary school.
Like not even high school. Or high school.
I meant high school also, right? But you didn't have Kuzari?
No.
No. I went to high school in Canada. They were progressive.
Wow.
And you did Jewish philosophy?
We definitely did the Kuzari. We did a whole year on the Kuzari. And I'm trying to think what other Sparm we did. But we did do Jewish stuff.
Right.
Nothing.
So I'm really glad. I mean, and the truth is, as a teacher, there are some topics we have a certain amount of choice in what we present to the students. And now I'm just talking about the students that I teach in high school. There are some topics I prefer teaching in Kita Yud Bet than in Kita Yud, because you really see the difference in my students' development and their, some things are just, so doing this, I think Jewish philosophy at this stage in our life is perfect. I tried to convince when I applied for a grant this year that it was worth investing in someone who's old by university standards, because this is the time that we should be doing Jewish philosophy. Okay, so just I want to come back to your question and be a little bit more specific. Why is there a debate about what is Jewish, what it means, what Jewish philosophy means? So I'm going to try and come in from a few different angles. Okay, just first of all to kind of present the question.
Hello.
Hi.
Would you permit me to say something very pertinent?
I would love for you to say something.
Okay. I'm in the hospital. That is a fact. We're not going to talk about that. I'm getting better. Okay. But this morning, something happened to one of the nurses' aides. I am very polite to the Arab women and everybody else. But I told her she has to come back later because I couldn't right now. So she just came over and she said to me, you know my name? And she told me her name. And she said, it means forgiveness. So you know what I told her? This is Jewish philosophy. Listen to me. I didn't tell her my Jewish name is Silka. But my Jewish name is Esther Silka. And that means no forgiveness. Yvonne?
Okay, interesting.
Did you hear me?
Yes, I did hear you. I'm
This
trying.
this is a little tiny point in Jewish philosophy.
Okay.
Silka
Okay.
means no, don't forgive them. I'm forgiving
Okay.
this woman, has nothing to do with her.
Right. Thank you for sharing that. I feel like I need to process a little bit what you just said. But I'm going to
Well,
take it with me. Okay, we'll take it with us.
On Yom Kippur, we say Silka. There's a prayer with Silka, and that means don't forgive. Or maybe it's Rosh Hashanah, I don't know. Okay, never mind. I'm sorry I interrupted.
No. Thank you.
Forgive me. Forgive me.
I totally forgive you. You're welcome. I'm happy for people to share. Okay.
Great. Yeah, bye.
I'm going to go back to my question. Maybe something like that we discuss now might bear fruit with you. Let's see what happens.
Okay. Great.
So I want to go back first of all to the question of Jewish philosophy. First of all, if you were to walk into university now, anywhere in the world, okay, and you would look for a Jewish philosophy department, where would you find it? What faculty? Jewish studies, okay.
Maybe the philosophy department.
Maybe the philosophy department.
Humanities.
Okay. Humanities.
The faculty.
Okay. So even this range of responses, all the answers are true, by the way. I think it's kind of changed now, but definitely when I was doing my master's, in Bar-Ilan, the Jewish philosophy department was in a different faculty than it was at Hebrew U. Hebrew U did not see Jewish philosophy as a sub-branch of philosophy. It was something else.
Shame.
Okay.
Well, in Stern College, it's both Judaic studies and philosophy
combined.
But these are all
From either
Jewish
side, you
schools.
can
I say.
Right.
These are all Jewish schools.
Kabbalah in Jerusalem. Kabbalah
But
is Jewish philosophy department.
Right.
My daughter's in Bar-Ilan, and she might be taking a class with Tanya, actually.
Yeah, Tanya's teaching
Oh,
there
wow.
this year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Totally take it. And it's for her credits for her like Judaic studies.
Mm-hmm. They've got classes in English at Bar-Ilan this year, and most of them are on Zoom so that people in the States can, like, specifically the States, they have some kind of partnership with YU, something. So
Oh, that's what I heard about.
She's just taking it in Hebrew though.
could be.
But I mean,
Okay. Good luck to her. Hope she enjoys it.
I took regular old philosophy at the University of Michigan.
Okay.
And we studied Aristotle and Socrates and all the good ones. Right?
Okay.
I remember almost nothing.
Wow.
I remember I think, therefore I am.
Okay.
And a couple of other things, and that's it. But Jewish philosophy, it would seem to me, is in a sense similar, but much deeper in terms of the meaning of our existence.
Okay.
From a Torah perspective, at least from the start, no?
Okay.
And then everything branches out from there.
Definitely. I don't know if I'm hearing if this is kind of in the subtext of what you were saying, but learning Aristotle, Plato, whatever, they weren't talking about meaning in the same way. Or did you feel that they were talking about meaning?
And the meaning of existence,
Yeah.
absolutely. But so to me, my original question was, are these, Torah-based people? Because to me, Jewish philosophy would be that idea, that thinking, but from this Torah perspective, from what Torah teaches us and finding the meaning of existence.
And I'm gonna go with what you're saying. When you say Torah, from a Torah perspective, you were pointing at like the Tanakh,
right?
But I assume here you mean something very broad, right? A Torah perspective also could include Torah shebichtav, Torah sheba'al peh, right? So in that sense, yes, okay. And it's funny because I want to. Again, I'm going to come back to two things that you've said, right? First of all, you mentioned the I think, therefore I am. Okay, that's Descartes. That's the 1500s, right? Mm-hmm. Now, today, or the question that I began with where would you find the Jewish philosophy department and which faculty, is kind of the whole question in some ways is related to Descartes. Okay, and why is that? Descartes is often seen as the father, that's Freudian slip, the father of modern thought, right? Of modern philosophy. And it's to do with this statement, right? I think, therefore I am, which he kind of comes to this conclusion in the course of his meditations, where he writes each meditation takes him a further step. But what he's trying to do in that book is to try and say, I want to try and start again from the beginning. Okay. He's an enlightened thinker, right? He's starting again from the beginning. He's saying, I'm going to put everything I know behind me, right? So it's not just, my family, my life, my culture, religion, anything, dogmas, anything. I'm going to try and start again from the beginning and see if it's possible to conjure up, right? That method is a method that he called radical doubt. I'm going to radically doubt everything I know and then try and start and build up from the beginning, right? And in some ways, that is how, right, philosophy is often presented as this discipline that starts from the beginning, right? That is naki. It's clean of like it's there's a pureness to it, right? We're going to try and study things really as they are, without any baggage, right? When Descartes says that part of what he's doing is he's also trying to get rid of religious truths and ideas of his time, although God is very, very central to his meditations. We don't need to talk about that now, maybe it will come up another time, but the very idea of saying, let's start again from the beginning, right? I'm going to look at the world through wondrous eyes, I'm going to start again from the beginning, sorry? I missed what you said? To mute them?
Yeah.
Okay. No, I don't know what the rules of play are. I'm happy to like. Okay. 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 Hang on one second.
Yeah.
It's really what's talking about. We
Yeah.
can't really hear.
Right,
that.
our-
So before you can start, I took a philosophy course and I have to look up now to see what the name of the course was. But we studied the philosophers. The professor was Christian
Mhm.
and used the Tanakh,
The Tanakh is his base text.
as a base text, connecting it. And you just gave me a new perspective on, just seeing it in many different ways, which I did over the years. But that was very different than she did it that way.
Right. So if we go back to what I was discussing here with Descartes, this idea, so then philosophy has become this kind of pristine, pure foray into the world of, could be the traditional areas of general philosophy. People will talk about metaphysics, they'll talk about epistemology, they'll talk about ontology, they'll talk about ethics. Those are like pretty much the kind of major categories, right, of the world of philosophy. But this idea of being without any baggage, clear thinking, right? Now, if I was to kind of match that with this idea of Jewish philosophy, right? Philosophy that is based on the Torah, right? In the broadest way, we mean. In some ways, you might say, well, these two things can't come together, right? If you come into the world of philosophy with baggage, right? You have a bag, right, on your back, or a suitcase that is full of Ma'amad Har Sinai, Yetziat Mitzrayim, providence, right? Hashgacha pratit, Tchiyat HaMeitim, all these concepts, right? Can they work together? Can they align with this notion of philosophy as this kind of pure, right? This pure field, which is starting again from the beginning. So in that sense, that's the first sense that it's, some people question what is this field? Is it maybe more theology, right? Theology is it's talk about God, but it's kind of also it's kind of accepting the basis of religion as the basis for talking about anything else. So maybe Jewish philosophy is really just theology in disguise.
Or Jewish thought, like in universities, it's often called Jewish thought,
Right.
which I think like is maybe more accurate because of what you're saying about philosophy.
Yeah, so absolutely, there are some people who are much more comfortable with that expression, Jewish thought rather than Jewish philosophy. But so that's one angle. Right now, I want to throw something in now, and maybe
Can I ask a question?
yeah, sure.
If we're saying that, you have Descartes who started and he threw away everything and he just took the world as it exists in front of him to start with, and that was his base. You can kind of say that by extension to the Jewish world is that the Torah is our base. So we are throwing everything. You can not look at the Mefarshim, you cannot look at, all the exegesis, but what you're taking as your base is the Torah. And from that building your philosophy, and hence falls into that idea of getting rid of everything else and just starting from the base.
Right.
So you don't have to disconnect the Torah from the world.
Right. But if I was, I intentionally didn't want to kind of go into Descartes. I'm sorry that you've become Descartes. It's, hold your title. But with Descartes, part of what he's saying when he said, I think, therefore I am, he's basically saying, I am anything I've known from the past. And I can't trust, I can't rely on any previous knowledge. And it takes him to this kind of very radical place where he says, the only thing that I'm aware of, right? I don't know if this cup is blue and white. I don't know if there's tea in it. I don't know anything. But the one thing I can be sure of is that I am a thinking being. I have thoughts.
It's the only thing that.
Right? Maybe my hands aren't even
Okay,
real.
so
Maybe
he's
my
even
body,
like going,
right?
right.
So
okay.
when he did this, he went really, really far. The only thing I'm sure of, right, is that I have thoughts. I think, therefore I am. Right? That's the only thing he could be sure. So
Right.
it's a very
So
different
further,
place to go
yes.
than to say the Torah is our base.
Because
Although
he's not even looking at this world.
yes,
Or there could also be a middle ground. Last week I was in the Anno Museum.
Yeah.
And their whole thing is, what is being a Jew? And one of their answers is being a Jew is somebody who considers himself a Jew. So they have like Jewish art, Jewish music, and so this kind of reminds me, it comes into this also.
into this, right?
Is it Jewish philosophy because the philosopher is Jewish and they come with all of the cultural, religious, whatever stuff, and that makes them a Jewish philosopher?
Okay, so
That's
this is a
approach.
perfect way to take us into another kind of problematic area, or an area that needs probing in order to understand what Jewish philosophy is. And I feel like I want to relate to what everyone's saying. So I'm going to hold on for 1 second. I want to say one more line, and it really just the line. There's so much more to be said about it, but I want just to say in brackets, today we know that the attempt to think about philosophy in the way that Descartes did, right? In this kind of pure, pristine look at reality. Today, right, in the world of philosophy, that has been rejected, okay? In other words, to look at philosophy as this highly objective, highly pure profession, all right, or category, or whatever it is. Today we know that when Descartes wrote what he was writing, he was sitting in a room wearing like a toweling robe, okay, next to a fire. He has an army background behind him. Today, so he's a kind of middle to upper class male, white Caucasian male, doing what he's doing. And that for sure influences on this ability to cast everything aside and start again from the beginning, right? So from many, many angles, like whatever, there's all kinds of critiques of this notion of philosophy. Philosophy is not pure. Everyone who comes to philosophy comes with a background. We can't deny our backgrounds. We also don't emerge as atoms in a vacuum, right? We are all connected to families, to traditions, to cultures, to whatever it is. All of that weighs into what we do, right? So to kind of present philosophy and probably science in that way, today is something that is not taken as kind of gospel, right? It's not accepted today, right? And in a way that might kind of lead an opening for us to say, well, and therefore it's fine to Jewish philosophy. At least we're being honest that we come with our suitcase of Torah or whatever it is, right? And we put it out there, and we don't start from the beginning. There's no way, only God can start from the beginning, right? We start in the middle. Everyone starts in the middle, okay? So that's just something, there's a lot more to be said about it. There's a lot of literature written on it. But without kind of going deep into that, I want to throw that out there because it's an important thing to know, that we don't relate to philosophy like that, like in the way that Descartes was revered for so many years, for hundreds of years. And now I want to come back to what you were saying before. Another kind of, in Hebrew, you'd say planter, right? Another kind of a thicket that we need to work through, an issue, okay, is the thing of who or what is a Jewish philosopher, right? And that's what you were raising here. And let me try and explain, and I'll give you some examples. It's funny, I didn't know if you'd want to talk about it, or if this is something that's been hashed out. So I didn't bring a sheet, but like I could have brought a sheet, whatever. But I'll try and I hope it's okay that I'm just talking and sharing this with you and you're not looking at something. There are different ways to understand who would qualify for this list, who gets into a list like this. And one of the ways that people have suggested in the past, okay, and I'll give an example, someone by the name of Yaakov Klatskin, who was he wrote philosophy, he wrote about grammar, he was a publicist. I'm talking, he lived in like kind of the middle of the 20th century, okay, in Israel. I think he came from Eastern Europe originally. He made this suggestion at some point that a Jewish philosopher has to be someone, his like major criterion was someone who is familiar and at ease in the Hebrew language. Okay, and when he writes his grammar of, or his kind of I can't think of the word, concordance of philosophical terms throughout the ages, that is his criterion. Like people have to, you have to be familiar with Jewish philosophy. You have to know the difference between tzura, right, and form and rayon, an idea or whatever it is. You have to be familiar with the Jewish language. Now that is, you know, much of modern Jewish thought has been written, right, in English, in German. In other words, there are many people who don't have the familiarity with the Hebrew language as Israelis, right? But they would be considered Jewish philosophers, okay? I'm just using him as an example, but we can call him a formalist, okay? What do I mean by that? He is emphasizing form, right? It doesn't really matter what people are saying, but if they're saying it in the right language, that makes them, that is a basic criteria for what a Jewish philosopher would have to be. Okay, now we can quibble with that. Okay, I've already raised some questions about that, but that was one attitude, right? Jacob Klatskin, he's a formalist. Now, another way of talking about what Jewish philosophy is to say, well, maybe Jewish philosophy, and you were trying, both of you, I've got to learn your names, and I just realized hi. Tzipora and Pam. Okay, so Tzipora and Pam, I think we're both trying to kind of work with that. You were saying no, there's got to be some basic content, right, that everyone who considers themselves a Jewish philosopher relates to in order to qualify as a Jewish philosopher. Okay, now there are lots of people who hold this view. All right, I'll give you two examples. Okay, one is a very famous professor of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew University by the name of Julius Gutmann, who was originally from Germany, and he writes this kind of tome about the philosophy of Judaism. And he said, because Jewish philosophy developed in the diaspora, in other words, from the moment the Jews were sent into Galut and they were dispersed all over, they never had, they didn't have a homeland, they weren't joined together in the way that other nationalities can describe themselves. So Jewish philosophy is not a Jewish way of doing philosophy. It's not like there's a Yiddish kop, right, in like maybe doing like business. So there's a Yiddish kop in thinking about philosophy in the same way that we might talk about continental philosophy, right? Philosophers from Germany and France in the 20th century, they have a certain way of looking at reality that seems to be different to other people, okay? So he says we can't talk about Jewish philosophy. It's not a Jewish way of thinking. What Jewish philosophy is, given the fact that Jews were dispersed and developed their ideas out of contact with their nation, their nationhood, is Jewish philosophy is a philosophy of Judaism. The base is Judaism. Okay, he uses the word Judaism rather than Torah, right? But that's the idea. The Jewish religion is the base. And then any kind of reflection, any kind of thought around that, right, is what Jewish philosophy is. Okay, we could, and we could call him an essentialist. The essence of what is being studied, that's what turns someone into a Jewish philosopher. Okay, now what and Gutmann actually says Jewish philosophy is the philosophy of Judaism in the same way that you have Islamic philosophy and Christian philosophy, right? That this idea that there is something given at the beginning, that is the religion, and then we respond to the religion. Okay, there's someone who takes this idea even further. He's still an essentialist, but he goes really far with this. And that is someone by the name of Rabbi Dr. Eliezer Berkovitz. Some of you might have studied him or maybe even known him. He passed away in like the 1990s. He's one of the thinkers that we're going to talk about this year, so I don't want to talk too much about him, but he's a 20th century thinker who was born also in Western Europe, but spends much of his life in the States, and eventually he makes Aliyah, and the last 2 decades of his life are in Israel. He writes about faith after the Holocaust. He writes about halacha, right? He has kind of the philosophy of halacha, and also he has quite a famous book about women in Judaism. He's one of the first people to write from an Orthodox perspective about women in Judaism. So Berkovitz takes this idea one step further, and he doesn't just say Jewish philosophy is about the philosophy of Judaism, the religion. He says in order to be a Jewish philosopher, you need to accept 3 basic principles. Okay? Kudsha brichu, Yisrael ve'oraita, right? That the God, right? The God of Israel, right? The people of Israel and the Torah of Israel, right? And when he kind of goes into this even further, he basically is actually talking about certain historical concepts. You have to accept that there was revelation at Sinai, that there was Yetziat Mitzrayim before that, right? You have to accept that all sorts of like kind of what we might call historical events happen. If you accept that, okay, you can respond to that, you can think about them, you can suggest all kinds of things about them. But when we talk about the philosophy of Judaism, not just kind of in a vague sense, the way Gutman did, Berkowitz says is much more specific. He says, to be a Jewish philosopher, you have to accept these premises. If you don't accept them, then you're not a Jewish philosopher.
That's like the Gimli coming with Rambam as being
Right.
Jew, right?
Right.
You need, these are
Right.
his basic
Right.
concepts.
Right.
So his.
Right. So, but I'll just throw out here, Pam, hang on one second. I'll just throw out here. Obviously, there are many people who are Jewish philosophers who don't go with that,
In
right?
other
Who might
words,
call maybe part of their Jewish
yeah, but
philosophy
in other
is
words, a Reformed
Okay.
Jew is not acceptable. And he was from
Right.
Germany, so he was standing up against that. Is that what you mean?
So yes, maybe according to Berkowitz's definition, okay, a Reformed Jew, right, who might not accept some of the premises that I mentioned,
As
might
God
not be
said.
considered Jewish philosopher.
Right.
Possibly.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Okay. So that's a second approach. And I'm going to throw out a last approach just to keep you all really confused. Are you confused? I don't know. I'm trying to be as clear as I can. But Pam, you wanted to say something. Yeah.
Can you define the word philosophy then? Because you've just talked about Jewish philosophy. Because I'm like, to me, I feel like the book of Iyov is philosophy. I feel Rambam is the philosopher. So what?
And what is it about then? See, I'm answering you with a question, which is not fair, but that's what philosophers do. Why? What is it about the nature, the kind of?
I don't know. I just like, give me the definition of philosophy, because I think I need to have a base of that
in order for us to move on.
For me, anyway. I'm sorry.
Maybe finish the
I should be muted here, and but I
don't apologize. The questions are great, and it's good to keep me grounded. And I don't know if I can give you a real I mean, we can all open a dictionary now, right? Someone can open a dictionary. You can even look at philosophy or Jewish philosophy. I'm curious what they would say. Okay.
Yeah. Right.
Okay. Oh, there's no Wi-Fi. Okay.
No, answer it later.
Yeah. Let me just finish this last point, because I want you to feel that like I'm trying to be clear. So I hope that I am. But I'm not pushing you away. I'm just we're gonna come back to you. The last approach we might define as something that's called contextualist. Okay. And what do I mean by this? Someone who you might consider a Jewish philosopher not to do what language he speaks, and not what kind of Jewish concepts or historical events that he's committed to, he or she, but you might see a Jewish philosopher to be someone who is committed in the sense to interested in the Jewish past, okay, doing his philosophy not just for the sake of sitting in a room and philosophizing, but kind of doing his philosophy in order to enrich or improve the Jewish people.
More like
right?
Culture.
Not just also culturally, but in other words, they're invested in the Jewish people. In other words,
of the Jewish
Like
people.
Viktor
Yes.
Frankl? Like Viktor Frankl?
for example,
Okay.
okay, but even I would say even sometimes you can have like I don't know, researchers, right, academics who are very, very interested in the Talmud, right, or they're interested in the Rambam or whatever it is, or sometimes you can have people who have maybe all the other criterion, but maybe it remains for them as kind of a professional interest, right? Yes, an academic pursuit. In other words, they may be very, very knowledgeable. They'll have more knowledge than all of us together about lots of Jewish topics. Does that turn them into Jewish philosophers, right? Apart from the fact that their mother might not be Jewish, but this idea of, are they invested in the Jewish people? Are they doing this philosophy in order that our nation should go forward, should understand itself more, should be proud of its heritage, should, I don't know, fill in all the options that are possible. But this idea of being invested in the Jewish people, right? Not just throwing out an idea and then moving on to something else, but you're kind of, you're doing this because you believe in this enterprise, right?
Would that be Martin Buber?
So Martin Buber for sure could be one of them, but even you know, like if I would give a name, someone who suggested this kind of attitude was Avi Ravitsky, who was a philosopher of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew University. Unfortunately, he had an accident a number of years ago, and as far as I know, he's still alive, but he's not functioning as a professor. And it was a big loss to the world of Jewish philosophy in Israel and in all the world. That's why it's nice to mention him. It's important to mention him, his contributions.
What's his name? Avi.
His name was Aviezel.
Okay.
Is Aviezel, but everyone Avi Ravitsky. And there are a few other people who suggest this idea, right? So they're moving away from the form, they're moving away from the content, and they're saying, well, let's just see, are these people, do they care about the Jewish world? Are they invested in it, right?
So a Christian scholar would not be considered.
Possibly by that definition, right?
Well, what would you say about Jordan Peterson, who has like a book on the Bible, right, and his philosophy and all that? Not that I read it, but you know, he's invested in the Jews as a people, but
right?
He's not Jewish,
right. So on all of these positions, we can raise questions.
Doesn't mean he doesn't have what to contribute.
No, is he a Jewish philosopher? But you're saying you don't have to be Jewish to be.
Well, I would think.
Yeah,
Right. But the one thing I can connect to with the contextualist approach, I don't know where I stand on this. Okay, that's important for me to say. But one thing I can connect to is that, and I've said this before at university, right? We've had discussions about this, is that I do feel that people who, all my colleagues, you know, all my friends at where I study and have been studying for the last few years, I think we all come from very diverse backgrounds. There are chilonim and datiim, men and women of all age groups, of all, like Ashkenazim, Sephardim, everything. You have everything. There are also a few Arabs in the department. There is a feeling, though, right? I've never spoken in this level to like the Arab members of the department, but for the rest of the people, there is a sense that people who engage in Jewish philosophy are very, very invested in the Jewish people, right? And I would say that it's different. I often do courses in the philosophy department. It's a different vibe. The reason why they're doing what they're doing, it's for a different purpose, right? Now, I don't know if this is a good thing or a bad thing, right? Maybe in the world of academia, right? Maybe that's the fact that people have this kind of emotional attachment to what they're doing. It's not just academic. Everyone who's engaged in it, it's about your kishkas, right? When you study Jewish philosophy, it's about your kishkas. And I feel like what I've just said is not at all, it's not academic, it's just a kind of a sense of meeting the people.
Say it's about your kishkas.
So today in the world that we live in,
it's like part of academia.
right? Today in the world that we live in, you can say it's about kishkas. Yeah. No, but you're right. Like for someone recently, it's very interesting. Someone, a Jewish thinker. We can all think about now why he's a Jewish thinker, but a Jewish thinker by the name of Arnie Eisen, okay, who was the head of the Jewish Theological Seminary. But he has been an academic for I think 50 years. I don't know how long he's been in the world. He recently brought out a book of theology, and it's called Seeing the Hidden God. And he writes, the reason that he writes this book is he feels after years of being kind of trapped by the demands of academia for objectivity, for this kind of, he suddenly has realized that really he just wants to write about Judaism in a kind of unlimited, exposed way. And it's actually a very, very meaningful, touching book. It's a moving book, right? And he's an academic, and you would think, and he's in his 70s, like it took him to be in his 70s to write this, you know, and there's suddenly a feeling of like, wow, like we should have had this 50 years ago, you know, if someone writing like this, but it wasn't allowed into the kind of the ivory tower, didn't accept it. So something's changing, right? And there are lots of ways to describe why things are changing, but what I guess what I've just done to you is we've tried to look at this concept, Jewish philosophy. I wanted to try and show why it's kind of a thicket, why it's kind of complicated. And I've tried to present different ways of dealing with the question. I haven't given you an answer. I haven't given you a definition. Okay.
You just want to think.
I want you to keep thinking, okay, and coming back and bringing it to the table so we can talk more about it. Okay.
That's the definition.
That's the definition, just to keep thinking and maybe some, every time we look at a new thinker, like go back to our definitions, maybe try and think about what he's doing, he or she is doing, where does it fit in? Okay. Someone else wanted to say something. Is there someone else wanted to say something? Okay. So unless anyone has a question about who's on here, obviously who's not on here, right? Rabbi Sachs is not on here. I know that there's a course here on Rabbi Sachs. I felt like I didn't want to bring him in. I felt maybe you were too saxed out by maybe Tanya. I don't know. So she was doing Greenberg. Right. Irving Greenberg's not in here because you had Tanya. That was like, So there obviously, as I said, the list isn't extensive, but let's go with it. Right. It's in Hebrew.
So if you can bring in Rabbi,
Yeah, I would love it too.
Yeah, okay. So this is the time to think maybe we'll take someone else and maybe we'll put in, we'll put in Rabbi Sachs. I just also don't want to promise you something good that I can't deliver. Like if we don't get through 18 thinkers, I don't know what I'm going to do. We're going to have to sit here through the summer or something like that. Yeah, we have to get to the lemon. Okay. So if anyone else has any requests, this is the time to think about it.
Are you going in order?
Yeah. Because we're going to work chronologically. It makes the most sense because some also, like I mentioned before, some people are building on who's come before them. Okay. Okay, that's really rubbish of me. What is Jewish philosophy? And there's no answer to the question. Great. Okay, classic Mahalach. Yeah. Okay. So now let's talk about Rabbi Saadia Gaon. Okay. I'm going to give out sheets, but I want to give you an introduction to the man before we dive into the sheets. So don't worry for the moment about the sheets. Okay. Let's just try and place him. Okay. We are now. I see
right to left, even though it's all English. Yes, I'm just clarifying.
Yes.
Okay.
That's funny.
That's fine. It's all good.
Yeah.
I'm just
Yeah. No, so we're starting on this side, not with the questions. We're starting with the.
Oh, so it goes
Yeah,
left to right.
yeah, it goes left to right.
Oh,
That's why I was just going to say left to right. Yeah. Okay.
Section 1.
Wait, which side was that?
Where with all the writing. Something else I want to just warn you about my sheets. I try like and save paper. It's I'm not an eco warrior. I'm just a Yeka. Okay. Yekas and eco warriors have an interesting alliance. I've realized over these years. And so often I will go for like narrow margins. So it makes my sheet sometimes look really scary, but like whatever, we'll deal. We're going to deal. So let me try and put Saadia Gaon, thank you, into context. Okay. I realize some of these things have got cut off.
Oh no, really?
Yeah. No, just like the first line of whatever. If anyone, some are better, some of these are better. Like I don't know how that happens. Like it's like these two are kind of maybe clearer. If someone has something cut off, they're okay. Okay. If you have something cut off, those are okay. Okay. So let me tell you about Saadia Gaon. Saadia Gaon lived from 800 and did you want something from here? 892. 892 to 942 CE. Okay. He's born CE. So he's born in Egypt, but he spends out the last X number of years from 920 onwards. He lives in Bavel, right, which is what we would call today Iraq, specifically Baghdad. Okay.
When was he born?
892, and he dies in 942. Okay. By today's standards, that's not such a long life, but he's a prolific writer and a leader and a Talmud Chacham. And it's amazing, actually, what he manages to achieve in his relatively short lifetime. Let me try and put like a little bit of a context of what's going on. Okay, so if we're in like the 800s, okay, 800s, 900s, what's going on? So in the general world, Christianity has already been has become the official religion, right, of the Roman Empire. Okay, thanks. Okay, and that happens like in 300, the end of the 4th century, right? And so it's kind of like Christianity is an official religion. At some point, a few hundred years after this, Islam comes into the world. Okay. Partly because Islam is both a religion and I can't think of the word I'm looking for, like a culture or a kind of a national identity, right? So it's not just, you know, you live wherever you lived at the time, it was probably Europe, and you practice Christianity. Here, the two things come together, and they're very defining of your identity. So relative to the spread of Christianity, Islam spreads very, very fast. It begins in the 600s, right? Muhammad has his first prophecy in the 600s, and it spreads. We're talking about like kind of the Middle East, right? It spreads within 200 years. It spread almost until India. On the other side, almost like into North Africa and the beginning of Spain, right? Going up already into Spain. And that becomes very central because whoever has a foothold in Spain has a foothold in Europe. Okay, and that's going to become if these words mean anything to the Reconquista or even the Crusades, all of that stuff we're not there yet. It's another few hundred years from where we are now with Rabbi Sadia, but it's all up ahead. Okay, the kind of clash of civilizations between Christianity and Islam. This is the time where both of those religions are kind of leaving their mark, their impression on the world. Okay. If you're living in Bavel at this time, so you're kind of under Islamic rule, all right. But well,
after him, not him.
Well, it's happening at this time, right? The 800s, there is already Islam is already in Iraq. Okay, it's not quite played out in the same way as of Christianity in Europe, right? To live under Muslim rule as a Jew, it's a whole different ball game, and we're also not in the high Middle Ages where it becomes like complicated. Okay, I'm going to qualify that in a second, but let's go back. So that's the general world. What's going on in the general world? In the Jewish world, what's going on? We've already gone through, right, the Tanaim, the Amoraim, right, the people who wrote the Mishnah, and then afterwards who edited the Talmud. That all happened already until around 600 CE. Okay, and from that point onwards, already from the time of the destruction of Beit Sheni, which happens in 70, Jews have been dispersed. Okay, so some Jews are still living in Eretz Yisrael, right? But many, many, many Jews are living out of Israel. They might be in Egypt. They might be in Bavel. They might already be even in bits of the Rhineland of Germany and eventually Italy and France, right? There might be kind of in what we would call Ashkenaz, right? It's the beginnings of Ashkenaz at this point. And I'm putting this out there because one of the things that marks Sadia's entrance into the Jewish world is a leadership competition. Okay, when we talk about Jewish communities in history, and the truth is when we talk about them today, people often talk about, right, Jewish historians have often spoken about the idea of a Jewish center and satellites. Okay, so if I would say today, where's a Jewish center in the world? Israel, probably also the States. Yeah, okay, even more specific. And then there are satellites in the sense they might be, I come from England originally, right? England was always a very small Jewish community. We were always in dialogue with the bigger communities around us. We had our own world, but we were small fish in a big sea, right? And the big sea, often the eyes were towards Israel or to America. Maybe some time ago, South America might also have been a huge, big Jewish center. I think it's maybe considered less so today. I don't know. I don't want to get into I don't know if I've said something political there. I don't want to go into it. But this idea of a Jewish center and satellites. So Eretz Yisrael in 800 is still trying to hold on to being a Jewish center. right? It was like that for 1,000 years, right? More, okay?
When was the Talmud Yerushalmi written?
The Yerushalmi comes around, I think, 4 to 6. Okay, 400 to 600, if I'm not mistaken. It's a little bit later than the Bavli. But it's trying to hold on. When I say to being a Jewish center, I'm not just talking about demographics. It's not just a question of, well, how many Jews live there compared to how many live, say, in Bavel, which is the next biggest Jewish community. It's also about authority. Who does psikat halacha? Who decides what's going to happen to the Jewish people? Now, at this point in Jewish history, Eretz Israel is trying to hold on to being that position. But the fact is, it's already waning in its authority. And Bavel is huge, okay? In brackets, the history of Jews in Bavel. Jews reached Bavel already in Churban Beit Rishon, 586 BCE, when the Bet HaMikdash is destroyed. First wave of people who are sent into Galut Bavel are the leadership. It's the leadership, right? The people who had positions of authority, okay? At the time, Am Yisrael said, right? Al Naharot Bavel, Sham Yeshavnu V'Bachinu, right? It was a terrible thing. First, our leadership was sent into exile, right? How can we manage without them? And then we were sent into exile. But the truth is that sending the leadership into exile actually worked out brilliantly for the Jews of Bavel, because they went ahead, they set up infrastructure, they set up the possibility for life to thrive. And that is in fact what happened. Jewish life thrived in Bavel. Okay, so we know, how do we know that? We know that from the demographics of what was going on. We know that we have historical accounts of, for example, the fact that there's a very famous Jewish family. I don't know why this point's like has stayed in my mind, but because it's just kind of quirky, that there was like a Jewish family that produced cheese, okay, on like a consumer level for the people of all the people of Iraq at the time, right? That's an example of someone like a family that was very entrenched in the kind of the consumer world of what was going on there. We know also that you ask about the Yerushalmi and the Bavli, right? Just the production of the Talmud Bavli, right, with all its reams of material, that is a testimony to the kind of the greatness of the community of Bavel. And I'll add in brackets, I don't want to belabor it because I'm sure you're familiar with it, but this idea that there are two main yeshivot in Bavel, Sura and Pampudita, and they are populated by a number of people who are learning Torah. But apart from those people who are learning Torah, there's a culture of respect for Gdolim, for Talmidei Chachamim. So for example, this notion of Yarchei Kalot, right? That there were 2 times in the calendar, one was in Elul and one was at another point in the year, where farmers, people who were like simple agricultural, people engaged in kind of simple pursuits, would take a month out of their lives and they would go to those yeshivot and learn Torah. Okay, even though they weren't Talmidei Chachamim, they weren't sitting in yeshiva for the rest of their life. There's kind of a culture that respects learning, that people were willing to take time out of their lives to go and learn, right? And so Bavel it begins in 586, and here we are in the 800s, and Bavel is still going, and it's going strong. And so there's kind of like a vying for who is, at the end of the day, who has authority here. And one of the maybe the biggest expressions of this kind of change in power, right? Who holds power, right? And it's religious and also political power, right? Is the story, the controversy of the calendar, the Jewish calendar, all right? I'm sorry if I'm saying stuff that you know, but like if you don't know about it, I like tell me. If you all feel like, oh, we know, like whatever, tell me, stop me. But just I'll just explain this background because this brings us right into the character of Rabbi Sadia. What happens is traditionally, right, the months of the year were fixed according to the sightings of the moon by Edim, by witnesses. And that was like a very important event. Just the fixing of the calendar itself is a really, really important thing for a number of reasons. There are certain points, there are certain tachanot within the year where things have to happen in the right way, even though, because we were reliant on a moon, things like time is dynamic, okay? But Pesach always had to be Chag Ha'aviv. It had to happen in the spring. It couldn't happen in the summer and it couldn't happen in the winter. It had to fall in the spring. There has to be 49 days between Pesach and Shavuot, for example. And there has to be X number of days between Shavuot and Yom Kippur. So there are certain points in the calendar where time, it was very essential that time would be regulated. So for many hundreds of years, we relied on the sightings of witnesses seeing the moon. But at some point, and especially as Jews begin to be sent into the diaspora, it becomes more and more difficult to rely on these moon sightings. So comes along Hillel HaZaken in around 400 CE, okay? He's an Amora. He comes along, not to be confused with the other Hillel, in Israel. And he says, from now on, we are going to make a calculation, and it's going to hold us in good stead for all Jews everywhere for all times. Okay? And that becomes the accepted way of fixing the Jewish calendar. It's not anymore dependent on sightings of the moons. We have a calculation, and that's how Jews from around the 400 onwards, that's how they managed to deal with the calendar. Okay, with the fixing of Rosh Hashanah, which then has an impact on all the other Chagim that follow. Hillel HaZaken. Yeah, around 400. Now what happens is, and that was accepted. The people in Bavel lived by that, and in all places lived by this calculation, this calendar. Now what happens in, we're now jumping to the year 921. Okay, in the year 921, the leader of the Jewish community in Eretz Yisrael, his name is Aharon ben Meir, okay, and makes the following announcement. And he says, in the following year, okay, due to certain calculations, I am preparing you all for the fact that in the coming year, the calculation that has been accepted, right? Hillel HaZaken's calculation is not going to be the one that we're going to use to address the Chagim for the coming year. And he presents some kind of justification why it's so. And he tries to inform all the communities within Israel and the diaspora, okay, that the calculation in the coming year is going to change. Now, what that means, and usually this is the example that people talk about when they talk about this. There's lots of things that we could address, but I'll give you like a kind of the most, maybe the one that will stay in our minds the most. According to his calculation, the months of Cheshvan and Kislev are going to be what's called Chasel. Chasel means they have 29 days. Don't worry, I don't do maths, so this is as good as it gets, right? They're going to be Chasel, and therefore Pesach is going to fall on Sunday in that coming year. That's what he's preparing people to be aware of. Now, according to the Hillel HaZaken calculation, which had been in use until that point, ready for 500 years almost, Pesach was meant to fall on Tuesday, okay? Because Cheshvan and Kislev went to be Maleh, right? 30 days. That gives us another 2 days. It makes Pesach fall on Tuesday. Now, what Aharon ben Meir was essentially announcing was that he was trying to shift everyone to his way of thinking. Now, if not everyone accepted his way of thinking, we would have a situation where Am Yisrael would be divided. Some people would be already eating matzah on Sunday. Others would be eating chametz, okay? And at the other end of Chag, right? Some people would finish Chag and other people will still be eating and eat their chametz, and other people would be having matzah. And obviously that impacts then on the following Chagim after Pesach, right? So Shavuot, where's that going to work out? Yom Kippur, right? Can we have a situation where some people are doing Yom Kippur on one day and some people are doing, in other words,
why potentially disastrous?
Correct.
Why did he want to make that change?
So he had a certain, I'm not even going to go into it, and I don't understand all of his, it's not just a flexing of his political authority, but there is a little bit of that going on here.
You want to match it up with like Palm Sunday or something?
I don't know. That's really interesting. Does it exist already at this point? I don't know. I don't know enough about Christianity, but
like was it Sunday? Because of Christianity?
It's not. It's to do with a certain like a tradition of a calculation that he feels very identified with, whatever. He puts out this announcement.
It's astrology.
Absolutely. No, that's always been. There's a notion of chaser and maleh, right? Which is why sometimes Rosh Chodesh is Aleph and Bet, and sometimes it's 29 and Aleph, right? It's to do with.
Did they have 2 days of Chag in Bava?
Yom Tov Sheni Shel Galuyot, yes. Okay. Okay, right. It's an amazing story, right? Like it's just mind-boggling. So first of all, I'll tell you what happened, but I just want you to know we have evidence of this story, by the way, from the Cairo Geniza. Okay, isn't that amazing? Something discovered in the 20th century, which has got documentation that goes back hundreds of years, right? I think the earliest documentation in the Geniza is around this time. We have the announcement of Aaron ben Meir. I was debating whether to bring it into you today, but then I thought it's more words and it's more what I didn't know if you want to. I don't know my audience yet enough. And I hope we'll get to know each other much more, but like, I don't know how much I should bring in, but we actually have the documentation, the declaration from Aaron ben Meir informing the communities, right? Next, in the coming year, things are going to change. Now, what happens is, and it's kind of unbelievable, but not everyone accepted his ruling, okay?
Jews.
And actually, yeah, obviously, our own worst enemies. And what actually happens is in the following year, okay, different Jewish communities celebrated Chagim on different days. Okay.
21.
Yeah, 21. It's actually 22, 23, right? But like,
Did anybody in Bavel accept this?
so yeah, it's complicated. Okay, so now I wasn't going to talk about this, but if you address it. If I can answer your question, then I'll address it. Basically, I mentioned before there are 2 yeshivot, Sura and Pompedita. Okay, so at this time in Bavel, there is change going on there. Sura is looking for a Rosh Yeshiva. Okay, Pompedita has 2 candidates for a Rosh Yeshiva, but there's a debate, there's a machloket. Who is going to take the mantle of leadership in Pompedita? Aaron ben Meir backs one of them. And so when he gives out his declaration, he includes the name of this candidate in his backing. So he's trying to use him to give his own credit, but he's also trying to push the candidacy of this guy, right? So it's when you say how did Bavel respond? So some people there were followers, were more identified with Aaron ben Meir, and some people weren't.
And he was in Israel.
And Aaron ben Meir is in Israel, who is the head of the Jewish community in Israel at the time. So this is a really, really big deal. Now, where does Sadia come into all of this? Sadia, he's just called Sadia at this point. He is an Ilui, he's a Talmid Chacham, right? I mentioned he was born in Mitzrayim. He moves around in his life. He spends some time in Israel, in Tveria. He also moves to Syria. He hears about this debate when he's at the time in Syria, okay? And he writes a tractate, okay, about the Jewish calendar, okay, called something Hachagim, Hamoadim, something Chibur Hamoadim, something like that. But it's not just like a little paper or he expresses his opinion. He really writes kind of a kind of a learned piece of writing about why he thinks that Aaron ben Meir is wrong and that we need to continue following the Hillel Hazaken calculation that we had, that the Jews have been following already for 500 years. And he presents his findings. There's correspondence, I think, even with Aaron ben Meir, who doesn't accept what he says. But this tractate arrives in Bavel, and he arrives after that. He comes to Bavel to present his ideas, and people are very taken by him. They're taken with his leadership. They're taken with his willingness to kind of stand his ground and say something halachic about what's going on. And in the end, even though Jews for that year celebrate Chagim at different times, first of all, after that point, the Hillel HaZaken calendar becomes the calculation, and no one questions that really ever again, right?
Rasag or
Because Rasag has a huge part in that, okay? There's also a realization that this cannot go on, right? Jews need to be unified and cohesive, and, we need to hold on to the Jewish people. It's bad enough we're being dispersed all over the place. We need to hold on to something that unifies us. And Rabbi Sadia is so kind of respected for what happens with this controversy that he is then elected as the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura. Okay, and it's an unusual moment because as the Rosh Yeshiva of Sura, he's an outsider. He wasn't
Daddy,
born and bred in Bavel, right? All those kind of things that we still have
That-
today, right? You know, is he a local? Whatever. Someone wanted to say something here.
Daddy,
I just realized.
Yes, our class is over.
Okay.
Daddy
So
Hagaon. Nachon.
So, and that makes him become the Gaon, okay? And this is the Gaonic
What happened
period.
to
Anyone who is a leader of the yeshiva at that time gets the title Gaon, and that's how Rabbi Sadia becomes Rabbi Sadia Gaon.
And what
Okay.
happened to our mayor in Israel?
Eventually, he
Does the shifting of
So
that
that
power that we're
it's
talking about
people-
now shift to
right.
Bavel outside of Israel?
Scholars of this period like to say that is Israel has already been on the wane for a long time. That is the moment where
The nail in the coffin.
the nail on the
But I thought the name Gaon, the title Gaon was the title given to the Rosh Yeshiva of Surah and Pumpeditza. It starts with the Sadia Gaon.
No, it exists beforehand.
They were a Gaon, anyone who's
Yes,
Rosh was
yes.
called a Gaon.
We have high Gaon. We have a number of people who are Gaonim.
So wasn't that the name Gaon?
No. It wasn't just
period of the
uniquely
Gaonim
given. Begins
started
before him,
beforehand,
a little bit
right?
before him, like kind of the 800s.
Okay.
And this is 922, 23. So now he maintains that title until he dies in 923. Okay, so we're going to stop there for today. Please bring your sheets for next week. If that's too difficult, because you're going to lose them, because I would lose them, you can give them to me. I'll look up.
Bring a few extra days.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Excuse, I just remembered
Thank you.
But it was now that I'm hearing it a different way. It was philosophy that was
Thank you so much. That was
Okay, I don't know where I'm going.
Hi, this is Susan Raymond. I'm talking from the Zoom. Hello? Hello, this is from the Davina. Davina.
Straight.
Hi, Davina. Hi, Davina. Hi, it's Susan Raymond. Hi. I'm just wondering for the next class, could we have the camera poised in such a way so that you're facing also the Zoom people? Because you were kind of a little sideways.
Sure.
If it's
I'm
possible.
sorry that it wasn't as it should have been today.
Okay, just if it's, if you could work it out, I would really appreciate it.
Okay, no problem. What's your name?
Susan Raymond.
I didn't catch it.
Susan Raymond. I'm from
Okay.
Jerusalem. I'm in Jerusalem.
Okay, so I am as well. Nice to meet you. Okay, thank you.
Bye.
No, what I'm gonna say is second. And just like like on the social science, there's a concept called bracketing. Have you ever heard of it? Yeah, okay. It's just like anybody who does like qualitative research, there's like this, like exactly what you said, that it used to be you had to like describe all of your biases beforehand. And now I think it's because of all the political influence on research that now it's like, okay, you are what you are, and you just say it the way it is. So it's not only in philosophy, in social sciences. Yeah, for sure. Colonialism.
Yeah. So we don't want to go too.
No, we're not going. Anyway, thank you. I'm actually a nurse. So my area is in nursing research. Yeah. But we do like interviews and qualitative stuff. So like part of it is just realizing and you are doing research. Like I'm not like you are. Well, and I come with my uncle and I say my area is in the right. So like talking to people about things like that, it's like, okay, I come from the same perspective. I have to realize that, you know, when talking and when analyzing.
I want to keep trying this one.
Great. All right, thank you.
Okay, even though.
Thank you so much. I feel like I have Tanya back in my life. A little flavor of it. I miss my philosophy class that she gave. I get on through, so I get a little bit from her, but it's not the same as
It's not the same.
frontal learning.
Yeah. And not only that, but like the context really like, I don't know, it makes a huge difference. It really helps.
We both went to private day school, and this was
Alright, I
really
have
lacking,
a little
like,
fun. Alright, I'm moving my stuff
Yeah,
in
it's
here.
I was a philosophy major in college, and half of my major was Jewish philosophy. Like they allowed, but it was in Stern, so they allowed you to put the Jewish philosophy in. I don't remember everything, it's okay. But like, you know, but I did like, you know, I had a full course on Descartes, right? Cogito ergo sum. It's like, okay, but I don't remember anything except for that. I did all the Aristotle. I did it all.
I was only
Don't
getting
remember
it from
anything.
Tanya for like the 5 years.
But
seriously,
but she did,
I got it
here for more than 5 years.
She could make it. I didn't.
She did a whole course.
I was a second year here. No, I started
That
with
was
her.
that was like 6 or 7 years.
No, I started with grade sheet.
Okay, so she did courses before this.
Yeah.
It doesn't, no, it doesn't matter.
She's really like Tim Cooper. She's
Lebanon, Berkowitz, everybody.
So the names are familiar, but like to see
She's a lot of
who they are as individuals and
Yes.
why they're
Incredible.
because that's Rambam to me. That's
Right.
Rambam. Like of course he spoke about.
We know what he did. We know what he Garrett him up. We knew like all the things that he did.
That's good. But I feel like to me, that's a big thing because I'm also like I feel like history wasn't part of it, and I like it. Thank you.
Thank you. How was?
I asked the keyboards.
Did I?
Yeah, from Linda. Yes, I mean, I've always been there for many years and he likes